Peter, you say it's possible to restore a healthy climate. That is a radical statement I've never heard before. Would you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, and it is a radical statement. I came across it over a long process. I started working with Citizens Climate Lobby, and I asked the executive director, Mark Reynolds, what's the goal? And he told me that the goal is a carbon tax. But I said, that's a means to an end. What's the purpose of the carbon tax? And he didn't know. So he said, Peter, you're in charge of finding out. You're in charge of the 100-year project. And I talked to the top climate scientists at Stanford, Columbia, MIT, and Harvard, and no one knew. No one had an answer. They said, we might be able to do a little bit better, but we're probably doomed because nothing's going to happen, and here's what we can predict. I decided that was not what I wanted to give to my children. And since my job was in charge of the 100-year program, I said, I want a healthy climate. And I just did a backwards engineering from there. I said, if it were a healthy climate, I've got stumbling too much. Let's start.
No.
No? Okay. If we had a healthy climate, how would we have gotten there? And it turns out the answer is pretty simple, that we have to get the carbon dioxide out of the air, and we have to cool the planet. And we know how to do both. We've gotten CO2 out of the air, and volcanoes cool the planet periodically. What it takes to get that done is technologies that we have, and some that will be developed. But the main thing is research. And the analogy is in 1961 when Kennedy said we're going to send a man to the moon and bring him back safely. The first thing we did was research, because we didn't know what kind of rocket. We knew a rocket could do it. We didn't know what kind. We knew there were radios, but we didn't know what kind we would need to use. And so we developed them. We spent a few very intense years researching the technology to see what's the best way to do it. And then we went off and developed it. It took 8 years to get to the moon and back. So what we need on the climate is to start funding the research. It turns out that there are scientists developing this technology, and they have almost no funding. Once the Harvard group that I know, they're looking for about $1 million a year, and although Bill Gates is funding some of that, he is smart and he won't fund the whole thing. Because if any private person funded the research for restoring a healthy climate, people would think that it's a conspiracy, that someone has some evil intention. So it needs to be publicly funded and publicly accountable. And to do that, right now, the standard agencies, the National Science Foundation, the Department of Energy, DARPA, they can't fund research for restoring a healthy climate because that's not on the national agenda. They're only allowed to fund projects that we are nationally committed to. And so the answer is to get President Obama to declare our commitment to a healthy climate, which then puts it on the national agenda. And the great news is that we don't need any funding at this point, because the amount of money that's needed is essentially rounding errors in these agencies' budgets. Now, in the intermediate future, in the next 2 years, 3 years, that there will be funding needed. But once people see that we actually can do it, once there's a lot of documentation and research, then the funding will be quite easy to accomplish. So what we want to do is create enough noise so that President Obama can comfortably declare our commitment to a healthy climate. Today, if he did it, he would be called insane. Just like the scientists call me insane. They say, yes, we can restore a healthy climate, but that's crazy. And crazy is something that's never been done before. Someone is considered crazy who behaves the way other people don't behave. But once there are a good number of people saying we want a healthy climate, it's no longer crazy. So what we want to do is first address and excite the climate scientists to say, yes, well, we could restore a healthy climate, and here's what it might take. And then we need to get the media writing a few articles. Not a lot is needed. Probably less than a dozen, a half dozen scientists, a half dozen articles, and 50 or 100 editorials and op-ed pieces around the country is all that's needed for Obama to be able to say in September, let's restore a healthy climate.
So it's now the end of June. So what you're saying is that in the months of July and August.
Yeah, in July and August, people, especially people who are watching this, need to start writing letters to their editor. You can talk to your member of Congress and ask your member of Congress to talk to the president. The president responds to Congress, and again, if he knows that they're talking about it, he'll feel comfortable talking about it. But it's urgent. It's not crazy urgent, but it's urgent. After Obama's out of office, the political situation is who knows, and we might as well assume the worst and get it done now.
Yes, and President Obama is one great opportunity we have to have America declare its commitment, and it's one we're focused on right now.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. So, any other questions?
No, thank you. That
Great.
does it.